Close podcast. Beyond the Books with me, Jack Carr.
Welcome to the Danger Close podcast, an IRONCLAD original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. My guest today is my friend and teammate, Dom Raso. We met at SEAL Team 2 quite a few moons ago. He then graduated to the ranks of the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, going downrange time and time again. When he got out, he founded Dynamis Alliance. You can find out more about them at crusheverything.com. And now, without further ado, Dom Raso.
What's up, buddy?
What's up, brother?
Awesome. It is so good to see you. And when I started this podcast, this was one of the main things I was looking forward to, is being able to turn off phones, all the things we just talked about beeping at me all the time that drive me insane, and just sit down and have a conversation with a buddy.
Yeah.
Because we don't do that enough. Like, we would never just sit down like this if we didn't have like a reason to do it on the calendar.
I just feel like that's
crazy.
very an intriguing point in life where you're like, we actually have to do this to catch up and be this focused. But it's good though, and I've been looking forward to it too, brother. So it's awesome to be here.
Awesome. But yeah, it's crazy how we have to do that. But I noticed it about other people's podcasts, over the years since I got out and wrote the first book and then started doing podcasts with other people, that that was very enjoyable to me, especially if I knew them. And even if I didn't, sometimes you create these friendships during these conversations with people that you don't even know, because you sit down and get to know that person over an hour, 2 hours, half hour, hour and a half, whatever it might be. But so for me, this is the best part. So we just get to catch up.
Yeah, dude, everything. I mean, Danger Close podcast, everything you have going on, it's awesome, And I always just find it very unique and interesting how James Reece and how I connect with, whether it's a creative side or gear. I just love everything that you're doing with the character right now. It's awesome.
Thank you. Well, your gear's in the books, like your influence is in the books. You led the way, getting out of the military first and stepping into this world of social media that I want to talk to you about later, and then building a business. And obviously we're not quote unquote trained for that, but what we are trained for almost inadvertently is to be an entrepreneurs. Because that's what you're doing on the battlefield, is that constant adaptation, obviously looking for gaps in the enemy's defenses, capitalizing on momentum and opportunity, which is really what we're doing now as entrepreneurs. But if we screw up here, it's okay. We can fix it tomorrow. We can adjust tomorrow. No one's coming home in a body bag because of the decision that we made. And you don't have to make decisions as fast because bullets aren't flying in. You can take a second, then you can sleep on it. But still, it's a game of constant. Don't sleep on it too long.
Sometimes we do get caught up in the it's life or death right now.
Yeah.
And we do, so that intermingling of the two worlds is very interesting. But the one word that hit me was adaptability, so no matter what the problem is or what the challenge is, it's that level of adaptability. It's just like, put it in front of me. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure out a path forward. So those principles apply to everything we do, whether it's an entrepreneur or being a great dad, I feel like apply really well. As long as we're continuing to evolve and grow and not get stagnant or stuck in a place that could hold us back or potentially be damaging in a way. Because I think some of the things can bite us in the butt too, from what we know and what we thought we knew.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Or we can look at these things, these problems as life or death when, hey, maybe we can really take a breath.
Need that.
We don't really need that level of intensity. Still that level of thought, but maybe we can take a pause and put a little more thought, because we're not required to make this decision right now because the enemy is flanking or moving to high ground or whatever it might be, or even more long-term, adapting how they do their IEDs based off our counters and all the rest of it. So it's, but adaptability personally and professionally. Like the personal side of the house also, when life knocks you down or throws something unexpected your way. I mean, you get to choose, as you know, whether you're going to sit there and just feel sorry for yourself or if you're going to adapt, because eventually you have to adapt. It's going to happen. You're going to get there. It's just how long it's going to take you to then realize that you have to adapt, and you got to get up and move forward. But before we get into more of that stuff, where were you like the first time that you found out what a SEAL was? Like, how old were you? Were you already interested in the military and knew you were going that route and then found out about SEALs, or what was that path like for you?
Yeah, this is easy because I was just with my buddy John, and John from Divine Canines is very, very awesome to see John and I where we're at today. He was actually just in Virginia Beach, and pretty sure we were 8 years old, 7 or 8. I'm a year older than him, but we were literally walking down the street, and we grew up right across the street from each other. I can literally throw a rock at his house. And we had just got done playing Manhunt, or we were doing something in the neighborhood. We'd do cops and robbers, all that stuff that you did when you were younger, paint our faces and crawl around. And I remember him saying, yeah, there's these guys that my uncle was telling me about, they're like Navy SEALs, they're like the best of the best, tip of the spear, however that came out.
Yeah.
I just remember him saying that and me being like, wait a minute, who's this group or this unit that's at that high a level? So it just intrigued me and I wanted to know more. And so me and him as young kids are just like totally feeding into this idea of who are these guys? What do they do? Why do they exist? And I think that journey led us to the point where we went to the local library. And I can't remember, but I think it was either 2 or 3 books that existed in the library at the time. And I remember the one that you flipped through was the guys in the desert on the side-by-sides. It was guys with the 50 cal. It was all the classic pictures that you see. But that sparked a journey in our hearts where it's like, we've got to know more about these guys. And so then we started traveling to different libraries. And then we were pretty much sold on the idea that we were going to become SEALs when we were older. Yeah. That was the mission. That was the journey. Everything in our childhood kind of led to that. We would surf torture each other at the end of the road, which we lived right down like 200 yards away from the water up in New England, which provided a really good opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
We'd go drown proof each other, 9, 10 years old in the local pool, where people were like, what are these kids doing? Tying each other up, playing manhunt, paintball. I mean, everything that aligned with that lifestyle. We kind of just pushed each other until it became a reality. I mean, it's easy to say from that point to when I was 18 and when I signed up, but there was a huge, long journey in there too. I had a lot of valleys that I went through that tried to grab me and pull me down in a lot of different ways. And luckily, I just snapped out of it one day from that journey. But John and I, there was a one pivotal moment, out in the front porch, playing with each other, basically saying, we're going to make a bet. Who's going to become a SEAL first? And we shook hands and we bet each other. I'm pretty sure it was either 50 or $100. And we shook hands on it. I beat him. He eventually did it. He owed me money for a long time. And I was
think it was
actually
1,000, wasn't it? Wasn't it 1,000 you guys
It
bet?
like collected interest over time.
Yeah.
We just give each other a hard time. I always got free drinks out of the deal. But this last couple of SHOT shows, we actually linked up and he finally paid up. And then I was so pumped to get the money and we threw it on a craps table and it was gone in about like 2 seconds. So it was the most anticlimactic thing that worked up to that point. But that's, in short, that's kind of the journey that John and I took. We motivated each other, we pushed each other. I think that was a key element in both of us really driving towards that goal.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, they don't build the Palazzo and Venetian because people go there and win all the time. No. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So in high school, did you do sports, and did you think about while you were doing those sports or about, hey, how's this going to help me as I move into my post-high school life, as I move into the military?
I think a lot of high school, at least middle school, I was pretty locked on and focused. I was working out on my own. I thought about the idea. I was doing karate. I went, Shaolin Kempo. I did that growing up. That was actually really good for me.
Yeah.
I worked my way through some of the belts. I did some instructing when I was younger. And when I shifted to high school, that's when everything started to kind of go downhill for me. I lost sight of that goal. I had started hanging around with the wrong people, letting influences and letting the world kind of take control of my heart and doing things for the wrong reasons all over the place in every aspect of my life, upsetting my parents, and just going down these dark paths. And so that kind of led me to a point where I was in pretty much despair at that point. I mean, I could unpack a whole journey of being younger, but I always say to myself, man, I was like, I'm glad I got out of there, but I'm lucky that I didn't either kill myself, kill somebody else, or, end up in jail.
Really?
It was that bad. I mean, a lot of those I got away by the skin of my teeth, and I know it's a blessing. I know it's purpose-driven and why I was able to see those things in my life. But it was really, really interesting in how I got out of that. So, that was just a part of it. When I got into high school, I played football a little bit. I stayed pretty active, but that whole high school era was pretty much just like all gray area for me. I just ended up doing the wrong thing.
Got it. You were fighting at the time?
I stopped fighting around high school, I think.
Yeah.
Again, hanging around with the wrong people, wrong motivations.
Yeah.
I started doing all the things that you shouldn't do. Drinking way too much, doing drugs. It was just stuff that I just shouldn't have been involved with.
Yeah.
And like I said, by the grace of God, I snapped out of it all.
That's tough, and it doesn't matter what community you come from. I mean, that stuff is there, and even more today. Like, you had influence that were actual people. Now, you don't even have to have an actual person that's a bad influence. That parent can see and say, wait, this something doesn't look right here.
Yeah.
It's all on these phones for these kids. And even if you're a parent, and we're struggling with it right now, in that you're trying to get these controls on there, and you can watch what your kids is doing, kind of, but they have counters, just like the enemy. They're adapting.
Yep.
Those kids, they're adapted just like the enemy does. There's so many other influences out there, some good, some bad, some positive, some negative, but they're influences nonetheless. And even if you cut all that out, there are still so many more distractions and influences than we had growing up. Just because, okay, maybe you take the phone away. Okay, well, guess what? There's a computer. Oh, I guess there's an iPad. Oh, there's an older sibling. Oh, there's a friend who has one. Well, they don't go to that person's house. Oh, guess what? You're in a carpool with someone who has one because there's 4 kids.
Yeah.
I mean, there are going to be these inputs that we can't necessarily control as parents. We can try, but that education piece and what you're doing a great job with, when I see how you're dealing with it, is I'm taking some notes. But like, you had actual people. Point being. Today, yes, they have actual people, and then they have all these other things as well. So I think it's a lot tougher now.
It is definitely a lot tougher. And when I analyze when I was younger, because if you go back and analyze our parents and what they went through, they were growing up in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And I feel like that's where a huge derailing of our society when it comes to moral principles and values started to take place. So that they were kind of like, oh, you can kind of do whatever you want, really. Now they're parenting us, and I saw that play out. So knowing what I did and seeing some of my other friends that didn't ever leave, the town that I came from, or still doing the same thing, is that we needed more guidance. We needed more men and influence in our lives to guide us on the right track. It always took a village to raise warriors and men. It's not ever since the last 100 years where really we're just like, oh, you can kind of go to another state, hang around with whoever you want, go to college, and basically you're letting professors and other children of other influence raise your kid.
Yeah.
Right? That's a completely radical idea from 100 years ago. Like 100 years ago, if I was doing something, that trade was passed down to my son. There wasn't even you didn't even think about that.
Right.
So this is something that I've been exploring both in my own life and in the lives of our culture, is like, how do we get that back? Because if I know what I got into, I can only imagine, like you said, it's more difficult now. And so how are we countering that to our own children? I mean, this is something I'm extremely passionate about, so I could sit here and talk about this all day. But I do think it takes some serious intentionality about rethinking about how we're parenting.
Yeah.
I have 5 kids. And for me, it's everything. It's the most important thing I do. Is making sure that those kids are being armed with their faith, their morals and principles, so they can go out there and know exactly what's right and wrong. Or maybe I didn't have that. I was able to slip up. Thank God I made it through, but man, I was so close to hurting people and myself. And it was by like 1 degree that could have happened and I wouldn't be here today. Just like everything else in life. But what could have guided me a little bit closer to the right path? Maybe somebody or a parent or an influence that would have been like, you know what? I need to rethink about what I'm doing before I go put myself in this situation. I mean, not only did I just make it out alive myself, but all the people I hurt along the way, all the people I damaged our relationships and really put pain in people's lives because I was being selfish or I didn't know the right thing,
Yeah. What was that point where you realized that you were going the wrong path and took that breath or whatever it might have been? Was there a culminating point of everything building up, and then where you said, oh, hey, you know what? It's time for a change. Boom. I'm focused on the military again. Here I go.
100%. And it was at the lowest of the low that I've ever been in my entire life. I think all the way through the journey of that dark valley, I certainly understood that some of the things I was doing was wrong. And I think having faith really young set the foundation where my heart, knowing that I'm kind of going down these paths for the wrong reasons, but yet the world grabs us, takes control of us, this idea of, I want to make my friends happy, or I want to go do this thing or this new fad. And that's what I tell kids all the time, be very careful about what you're letting control your heart. So along that journey of years, I guess 2 or 3 years really where it got really bad, was watching my life kind of fall apart. I got kicked out of my mother's house, I got kicked out of my dad's house, and at fast forwarding that part of my life, it is tough to talk about. It really is. Like, I've, at this point in my life, almost not erased it, but kind of put it where it belongs, to be like, that was a part of who I was, but I know more now because of it, because I went through those tough times. But it was really at a point where I was living in an apartment, I mean, drinking drugs every other night. And ultimately it led me to a point where I was at the point where I was thinking about killing myself. I mean, I got that low. And that's tough to say because it's so long ago and it's such like a foreign idea now. Like I would never even contemplate that at this point, being rearmed with faith and the values that I have today. But at that moment, I was by myself in a bathroom, and I will never, ever forget the feeling of God's grace and forgiveness coming over me and literally like grabbing me by the shoulder and be like, this isn't where you're supposed to be. This isn't who you are. Wow. And literally feeling that love of God and totally at that moment being like, whoa, like what am I doing? How did I get to this point? How did I let life drag me so far down this path? Wow. And the next day I walked into the recruiter's office.
No way.
The next morning, I stripped everything. I got rid of everything. I changed that moment.
Wow.
At that very instant, I changed. And I walked into the recruiter's office. And I'll never forget the two guys that were standing there looking at me. Shaved head, super skinny, malnourished, didn't have my stuff together, baggy clothes on. And they're like, I'm like, yeah, so I want to be a SEAL. And they looked at me like, this kid. Like, yeah, okay, kid, go take the ASVAB. It's in the back of the room over there.
No way.
And I remember the first time I went back there to take the ASVAB, and they just were mocking me the whole time. I remember feeling that pressure from them. Like, there's no way, you're in the wrong place. But I remember being so convicted of that reinvigoration of, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And that from that point on, my life changed. Yeah, I mean, I started running the very next day. I threw my boots on and jeans. I had no idea how far I was going. I just went out in the street and started running.
No way.
And I kind of reconnected with what I said I was going to do. And so all that came flooding back. And I started to kind of contemplate and go through all the things that I did wrong, and in that moment, kind of reconciling with my dad, with my mom, at what little bit I could. Mm-hmm. And I think I was 17 when I went to the recruiter's office. I was 17 years old saying, hey, this is what I want to do. And so they put me on the path. I eventually went into MEPS. Mm-hmm. Even in the midst of trying to get into the Navy, there were some mishaps that occurred. I actually remember getting pulled over while I was signed up for the military, waiting to leave. And so my mom actually saved my butt on that one. I forgot, I think I was speeding. I was speeding and got pulled over. And my mom came out, and because I had done so many things wrong, they're like, hey, you're probably gonna have to get, either arrested, or we're gonna have to talk to you, or this is gonna go on your record. But my mother was so worried about that stopping me from going to the military. She called everybody she knew in her phone book. Wow. And somehow, I don't even know what she did, but I'm not even gonna ask any questions at this point. My mom, God rest her soul, she's in heaven at this point. But she stopped that from happening. And then so all these little things that tried to stop me along the way, eventually leaving, launched where I am today, sitting here with you. Wow. And how many times have I said, man, how surreal is this? I'm sitting here with one of my best friends, John, right? You sitting here, like the things that we've been able to accomplish, but coming from that level, I always try to tell kids, you can do whatever you put your mind to. I knew Adam Brown really well. Yeah. And so while it's really challenging for me to read his book, I can relate to a lot of what he went through and a lot of that struggle and that journey that he eventually took. Being in despair and being in that low, but God using that as a way to glorify these things that we go through, these dark places that we visit in our lives, these struggles, this adversity. It's all purpose-driven. Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I think it would be hard for somebody that hasn't been through something to sit there and preach about that circumstance. Yeah. But out of all the things that I was able to see, this in particular, I was like, I know what it's like to be at that level. I know what it's like to hang out with gangs in the middle of a city, shooting at people at 2:00 in the morning while people are trying to, manipulate you into doing something you don't want to do. I know what that feels like. So when I look at somebody in the eye, I'm like, I can feel your pain, and there's a much better life after that. That's just one instance, but I just feel like God uses those things for us to be able to see that and to help other people. And I think that that's what it's about, is to be able to give that back, to be able to serve others, to stop that from happening. Goes right back to parenting. How has God given us the experiences that we have, and are we using it to our full potential for our children? Yeah. Do we know that? Are we really applying that? Any one of these 1 degree changes could put my son in the right where I was. So am I doing enough to stop that from happening?
Yeah. Oh man. So at 17 then, did you stop like next day, no more drugs? No.
Everything.
Bam. Started running, started working out.
Everything.
What drugs were that you were like, okay, I can make this? And were you ever tempted to go back?
Nope. I never was tempted to go back, and I didn't even think about it for a second. I have really dug into that, both professionally, personally, pre-military, post-military, is that if anything's kind of taken control of my life, and I've done this in the past, whether it was cigarettes, whether it was any of the things that I was doing, any of the drugs that I was doing, I always knew that I had to be able to put them in their place to not be able to control me. Food's the same way. Anything that we have, habits are the same way for me. If I feel like they're starting to grab me in a negative manner, I'll put them in their place. And of course, that's easier said than done from some people.
Yeah.
But I do believe that we need to practice that. We need to exercise that and do that. But right at that day, I just was like, that's it.
That takes a lot of strength right there. And interesting that you talk about parenting and these influences, because they're like mentorship. There's a reason that a mentor is not a parent. Really, if you go back and look at the history of that word and what that position meant in society, a mentor, because it does make a difference. Like when you tell my kids something, it's different than me telling them
100%
something, whatever that is.
Village.
There's something there. So that's why mentorship and a mentor was so important for people in the past. And they didn't have these influences. They didn't have any of these influences that that have been talking about. And interesting, you talk about culture earlier as well. Like some of those influences in the 80s, movies. And movies used to be our most powerful export from this country around the world, Hollywood, and in a good way. And people would see these movies and say, "Oh my gosh, I want to go to that country. Maybe I want to be a movie star, or maybe I can do this and that." But now, obviously, Hollywood a little different. But if you grew up in the '70s, if you grew up in the '80s, even the '90s before the advent of social media, but I'll focus on the '80s. If you didn't have a mentor, you could have almost a virtual mentor in some of these people in movies. I mean, Rocky movies growing up, hugely impactful in my life.
Yep.
We identify with the underdog, and then you see this person rising from nothing and facing these struggles, and then facing adversity and going. I mean, it's an amazing story, which is why everyone around the world knows that story, knows the Rocky story.
Yeah.
But you had these movies where you had, and for me, I would identify with these obviously special operations focused movies, whether it was Rambo or Commando or whatever it might be, Predator. But those were a big influence in a positive way. In that, hey, I want to be like that guy. I want to be like John Matrix or Dutch or whatever it is. Like I'm gonna do. How do I get to be like that? Well, I got to work out. I guess I do some pull-ups. Those are pretty big guys over there. They look pretty in shape. Yeah. And just, that was very powerful. But I think now there are so many other distractions for these kids. Like my kids don't even watch movies like that anymore. Yeah. They're like, there's not something happening every second for them. Like the TikTok brain. Like Wall Street Journal had an article on TikTok brain, about 15 seconds worth of distraction until you need another one. And so I printed it out. I took all the advertising, all the distractions within the article, and gave it to our little guy, our 11-year-old, for him to read. And so he can be aware of what's going on out there, and just trying to do the best we can, though. But that mentorship piece it's important.
The key thing that you said, and I knew this about, that's why I said it takes a village to raise your kids. It's truth. There's truth behind that. And there's been a beautiful thing happening locally for us. And knowing that, we've been leaning into that idea. I have a brotherhood of men that we meet every week. We pray together. We literally do everything together to try to help each other, professionally and personally. And the fruits that have come to fruition from doing that is exactly like you said. If Dominic, which he's with me now, right? And one day I'll probably do a podcast with him at some point. But if you came up and said something to him, he's going to resonate with that. He's going to look at you. He's going to be like, he's going to look up to you. And so if he starts hearing that consistently, which is what happened in the village, hey, we're all living this path for a reason. This whole village, that's our goal right there. We're all in this together, unified. And that does something powerfully different to a young boy, especially young kids, young girls, even so. And I think that that's something that we need to fight to get back to. And we've been working on that. And just the fruits that that's been coming to fruition in our own lives is true. So I think that for anybody that's out there that's being a parent, it's like, who are you surrounding yourself with?
Oh, yeah.
And are you okay with your kids hearing what they have to say? And the technology piece, man, we don't allow technology in our home.
That's good.
Period, end of story.
Or soft drinks.
Or soft drinks. Yeah, we don't, high fructose corn syrup's like, boom, done. But the technology piece is critical because there is no control over it. I can barely even understand it myself, and it's constantly adapting. So that should beg the question, how are we even coming close to thinking that that's okay? We got to put that in its place. It's like what I was telling you about. Put that in its place, let's go from here. I think today, you'll hear me say this a lot, we need to be radically different than the world is telling us to be.
I like
and
that.
that's the mission that I'm on right now. 1,000% radically different. I question everything that the mainstream anybody's doing. And so I put it in its place, I question it, I analyze it, and I look at what's real, what's true, what's been working for thousands of years. Do that first, and then we'll explore.
Interesting.
So that's a whole just idea.
No, I like that, being radically different than the world's telling us to be.
100%.
Because the world right now, this is a slim portion of human history where we've had this technology, where we've had these, the option to dial 911 if you hear something outside, or to go to the grocery store to get some hamburgers for dinner. That is this much of human history. The rest of it, we had to be good fighters. We had to be good warriors. We had to be able to go out there and hunt and put food on the table, because if not, guess what? We're dead. Our families are dead. Our village is dead. Our community's done.
Just that idea alone, why wouldn't we take that small percentage and just literally put it where it's supposed to be in its place and keep these principles? You know, everything you're saying is right. And I just think that we need to get back to that as much as we possibly can, and not just say it and know it's true, but actually live that out.
Yep. Yeah, as we try to do with the kids, we try to go on these hunts, because a lot of places where we hunt, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no cell service. And then they get to see, oh, here we go. This is what people have been doing for thousands of years. We might go back to it. Society is quite fragile, which early 2020, people started to realize just how fragile society was, throughout most of 2020. And I think some people took some steps. I got a lot of calls from California wondering why they couldn't just walk into a store and buy a pistol or a rifle and go home and have it just in case. Yeah. Well, if you've been paying attention, you've been voting people into office that have been restricting that right for you for quite some time now. But they thought that you could, and they were shocked that they couldn't do that. It was surprising how many calls that I got like that, or text messages that I got like that.
Nothing surprised me during that time. Nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, not one thing that came up was like, oh, this is different. I didn't expect that to happen. I'm like, these are all just the principles that we've been saying are true, which is why we train, which is why we prepare our mindset, our families. We try to stay to these foundational things that prepare us for moments like this. You know, that's why, oh, okay, no big deal. We're just doing what we always do. I mean, things didn't change for us very much.
Yeah.
We homeschool our kids. You know, literally, we didn't skip a beat.
Yeah.
You know, we're like, well, what can we do with all this time that, you know, people are basically taking away from us? Because, we can't go out to eat. No, that's not that big of a deal.
Right.
You know, more family dinners.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah, my wife said at the beginning of that in 2020, she's like, not much has changed for you. Like, I know, it feels pretty much the same. But there's some things to tweak. You know, there are a couple things that I wanted to tweak it. It was a good, even for me, someone who was grown up before the military, before I didn't have a great awakening, I was just always drawn to the outdoors, drawn towards being prepared. It was just a very natural thing for me. It was just in my blood. But maybe want to tweak things. So we'd moved a couple times, and we're in a new place, and some things maybe weren't as dialed in as I wanted them to be. And so I took some notes and made some adjustments. Mostly minor. But still, it was an opportunity to do that. Yes. Some people made some major ones and then went back to being the way they were. Some people made some major ones and stuck with it and made a lifestyle change, and now are aware that, maybe I should have a fire extinguisher on each floor of the house. And you know what? Maybe the kids should know how to use it. Let's go build a fire in the backyard and teach them how to use this fire extinguisher. So the first time they're using it isn't when there's an actual fire and they realize they don't know how to use it, or it's expired, it doesn't even work, it's dusty, it's been there for 20 years. And maybe the babysitter, maybe we have a babysitter, or maybe we have a grandparent living with us. Do they know how to do that sort of a thing? Do we have some water? Do we have some food? Do we have some ammo? Do we have firearms? Do we know how to use them? Do we have some medical training? Do we have some medications? That sort of like the basic stuff that you've had to have done for most of human history to survive. So I thought that was very interesting. But going back to MEPS, I remember that very distinctly, going and taking the ASVAB and doing the physical and getting on that bus and going to boot camp and the whole thing, and just boot camp and OCS that happened years later. I put those in the same category because they were exactly the same. It was just that's a gray area for me because I just wanted to get to buds. Just
that was the same
get to buds.
mindset that I had.
But what was that like? What was that experience like? Like you get in, your mom helps you out of that ticket, and you're on this path now, and off you go to Great Lakes. And were you dive fair program? Was that still going? So you just went. You were just enlisted and you're going to try out. You didn't have that contract that says, like, the dive fair program was pretty much a scam. It was like, hey, we guarantee you the ability to try out at boot camp.
Right.
But I didn't know everybody got that. Yeah.
And then basically it was like, whatever school you pick, if you don't make it, that's what you default to.
The source rating.
So they kind of laid out all these options for me. I don't forget that because they had parachute rigger and they had several other ones that were like months long.
Right.
And I remember looking at all of them and be like, well, what's the shortest one? I'm just trying to get the buzz.
So many guys did that, and I did not do that.
Well, I'm like, why 6 months? No, I don't want to spend 6 months over here. I'm trying to get the buzz.
That was smart.
So parachute rigger school was like, what, 6 weeks, 8 weeks?
Okay.
It's like, that's clearly the answer.
Interesting. And
so
did you know which one was the source rating? Like sometimes I've heard stories of people that think everything's source rating. What I thought, and then it's not a source rating for buds, and they have to go to the fleet for 4 years.
Highlighted that for me.
Okay,
they did at least say that this was this. So I narrowed it down to whatever the 3 or 4 were, and I just picked the shortest one. And so for me, I feel like there were a lot of times where I just barely made it by the skin of my teeth. I mean, I was in boot camp, and I was like, oh, there's this training program for like the SEAL EOD guys. How do I get to that? Like, yeah, well, you don't really do that unless all these things are in place. I'm like, oh, well, it's earlier in the morning. I got to wake up early. And then it was based off of my recruiter's attitude or my, whatever the guy's name that led the.
It was like a dive motivator or something? Or do they have
no, just whatever your little crew there was.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that as well.
Anyway,
yes,
it was like up to him.
Yeah.
He's like, today I'm not really feeling it. Like, you're just going to go. I'm like, okay. And I would just beg him. And then I feel like, okay, he's not letting me go.
See, I think that's what the dive fair program did, is on paper, it guaranteed you the right to try out. So you couldn't have that chief or that E6 that was in your
I didn't have that. I had to fight for it.
Interesting.
I mean, I literally had to beg like multiple people to get them to talk to each other to be like, well, he's clearly trying to go, let him go. So then the first time that I did the test, I did the test again in boot camp. And remember, I hadn't even known what the test was before I got in.
Really?
Like I kind of glimpsed at it, but it wasn't really well known. Not like now, like we can Google everything and overthink everything to a nauseum, right? Into a point of paralysis, which I warn kids about all the time. Like, stop freaking overthinking this thing. Just go.
Yeah.
But when I did the test, I did the swim test, dude, I was like a drowning rat. Like lap 5, I was like,
really?
Like, didn't make the time.
Really?
And I got out of the water like, oh my goodness. Like this is way harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And so I then kicked it even more high gear, trying to get the time to go swim. And I was just determined to figure that out. And within about a week, I had pushed every day to get to the swim up. No. I was asking questions. How do I get the stroke better? How do I do this better? I was watching guys. I would sit in the side of the pool. Whatever second I had left over, I would literally, before I went to bed at night, I would practice the stroke in my rack or next to my rack.
Yeah.
And I just got it to the point where I passed everything, almost at the very end of boot camp, but I did it. So it was by the skin of my teeth that I did that whole thing, that whole progression, because I had never known what the actual test was until I was in boot camp.
Wow.
So that was interesting too.
It's harder than you think. Like it looks on paper, it looks easy. You're like, we're 10 pull-ups and
not when you put them together.
How many 2-minute pull-ups or push-ups, sit-ups, and the run and the swim. But when you put it all together and you had the stress of being there, like it's not as easy as one would think.
Yeah.
It's actually a good little workout.
And to this day, I still think it's a good baseline of where are you?
Yeah.
Even for me, like if for anybody, if it's 30 years from now, where are you at on this test? But that was an interesting thing. You talk about the will to fight. I always say that, the will to fight. I had to dig. in boot camp to find that inch, that second,
Yeah.
to be able to get to the point where I passed. But then that was it. Got into buds pretty much right after that, right? Yeah, I don't even think I got time. I think I went right from there
So
to buds.
parachute rigger school.
Yep. Oh yeah, parachute rigger. That's right. Parachute rigger. Pensacola.
Where was that?
That was in Pensacola.
Okay.
Yep. Did that quick school and then right to boot camp.
Okay.
Right
Right to buds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't look at the time. I didn't even know if there probably was a parentheses after the source rating that had a number of weeks in there, but I don't think it didn't register with me to do that. I just looked at them and looked at something I'd like to do, or just have somewhere I'd like to spend my time. So I was like, Intel. I'm like, okay, that's me, Intel. So I went to Intel school for 16 weeks, and you have to wait on either side for your class up for like a month, that sort of a thing. So it ended up being a long time, just in Dam Neck, Virginia Beach area, for Intel school there, Nimitzi, Navy Marine Corps Intelligence Training Center, I think so. But I got to be very good at mopping. I mopped the bottom floor in the morning, and then I had lunch, worked out, came back, did the upper floor in the afternoon, then went and swam or ran. And we had a good solid crew, guys that were all together there, that came through together, did Intel school together, did buds together, SQT together, and then went to separate teams. Some of us went to the same. But it was a good
awesome.
solid crew. Yeah,
awesome.
we stayed focused, and there's no program. You couldn't Google any CrossFit or buds training programs. So it was just us kind of making it up.
I think that's key, man. For kids these days too, is seek that brotherhood, seek that friendship. When you have other men, you have other people keeping you accountable, there's power to that.
Yeah.
And really being able to check in. I feel like a lot of guys, and that's guys rise to the top and they have their friendships, and friendships are forged throughout that time. But even being more deliberate ahead of time, I think guys lack that now because it is so social media driven. You kind of just show up, you check the box, and you leave. It's like seeking that local community, that local crew. Like even me and John, best friends growing up, being able to do that together side by side. You having that crew, still talking to those dudes today at this point, is like, again, getting back to that of what's really, going to help guys, make it and push each other.
Yeah, and guys ask me all the time, what should I do? And they can Google and find out all the different things you can do. But it's testing yourself. Like, you can be in great shape and do these programs, but if that program isn't testing you to the point where essentially you want to stop. Like for me, growing up, I grew up in essentially mountains and ran hills. Ran trail running before trail running was a thing. Before they made specific shoes for trail running or whatever, I was running trails, and because I thought this is tough. And now when you're running up a hill, you want to stop, and I didn't. And so I was thinking, like I was thinking about those things that guys did in World War II, Vietnam, because you're thinking about Vietnam books and stuff, and you're thinking about them running through the jungle and slitting throats and all that stuff. And so, you're running, but that stuff, and then jiu-jitsu. Like I started jiu-jitsu early when people hadn't even heard of it yet, early 90s. And still to this day, one of the hardest things that I've ever done is doing a promotion or whatever, where you're on the mat and they send in fresh people, like 6 people, and you're just there for who knows, because there's no stopwatch, and you're just going an hour, 2 hours, whatever, and you just keep going. And it's like, it's a, survival. I talk about prevailing. I know you do talk about it too. There are 2 different things, but you're on that mat and here comes somebody fresh. And here comes somebody fresh, and here comes somebody fresh, and you don't get off to take a break. And I still remember, so in buds, running on that soft sand, on those swims, I would think back to that. I would think about Iwo Jima, I would think about Normandy, I would think about, hey, those guys gave me this opportunity to be here. I can swim a little longer here, I can do a few more push-ups, I can get yelled at in sunny Southern California. It's okay. Yeah. But on the physical side, I thought back to being on those mats. And so I think boxing and jiu-jitsu for people still, like if you're in that ring and they're putting fresh people through,
1,000%.
or you're doing those boxing workouts, or you're on that mat and you're doing those jiu-jitsu workouts, like I still think about that today and how difficult that was. But that really helped me in buds. And then even because in boot camp, I got out of shape in boot camp. That was awful. You're marching everywhere and you're eating that horrible food, and you're like, so I was still in fine shape, but at night I remember we had wrestlers, because most people in the country back then, if you were coming from out of high school into the military, a lot of guys had wrestled, and I didn't wrestle, but I did jiu-jitsu, and no one had even heard of it really. And the UFC had started a couple of years prior maybe, so people had started to, but I had a little bit of a head start. But back then, if you could do a guard, do an arm bar, a mount, like 4 things, then you were like head and shoulders above most of everybody else. I did plateau there, of course, but I remember moving the bunks in boot camp to the side and getting out there with wrestlers on the ground, because I thought, here's my workout now. And they did not know what to do with jiu-jitsu
That's
back
awesome.
then. It was really cool, and it did get, got some workouts in. But yeah, we worked out, got to buds, and it was, looking back, it was all fantastic. But you made it through what is your original class, or what was hard for you in buds? Did you struggle with anything?
Yeah, no, I made it all the way through. Of course, there were challenges along the way. I just feel like once I really committed my mind to it, there was no option anymore.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I'm pretty good at diving into the deep parts of my brain and kind of reprogramming myself. That's what I do every day now. That's what I've really focused on post-military career as well. But in the beginning, even the idea of the bell or quitting, I kind of started to erase that idea, and I don't know if lying to yourself is the right way to frame it, but you're convincing yourself of an alternate truth, that's just not reality. It's just not real, and it's not possible for me. So the whole way through buds, quitting was never even close to an option. That only out was either death or just something was going to break.
Yep.
And I never forget, right before buds even kicked off, I was doing the indoc phase, and I was on the beach trying to push myself. I would go do things by myself all the time. And I went out and I rolled my ankle, like pretty severely, more than I have in the past, on some soft sand. And I mean, we were getting ready to class up in about 2 weeks. And I remember calling my mother, being like, hey, Mom, here I am, 17, 18 years old, like, hey, rolled my ankle, feeling really sorry for myself. And I'll just never forget her voice. She was like, snap the heck out of it. She's like, get over it. She's like, I don't care if your leg's falling off, you're gonna push through. And it was like, that was the voice that I needed to hear. As small or as big as that would have been, just the emphasis on reminding parents how important their voice is, how important their encouragement is.
Yeah.
Because that was just the nail that I needed to say, that's it. No matter what happens to me, I'm going to push through. Because I allowed myself to kind of play victim. And we do that to ourselves. Well, my ankle. So I'd have an excuse. I love that in today's culture in our brains. Everybody's got an excuse, and you can play these games with yourself inside of your head. But it's taking that personal accountability to be like, who cares what anybody else thinks and what I can get away with? It's what I know. When I go to bed at night, could I wake up and go?
Yeah. That's
the real question. That's the real fight. I don't care what you think. I don't care what anybody else thinks about my ankle. And that kind of just pushed me into my career. Just with that same attitude and mindset. Challenging, it's really tough to go back and think about this. Let's see.
You were good on the swims after getting better.
I was always just like struggling to get by.
On the swims?
But I was always like that. I started that way.
Yeah.
So I always just appreciated the fact that it was always a fight. Like a run was never just like, oh, there was just the 4 miler today, all good. I pushed everything I did, I had to push. The swims I had to push. But I was passing stuff, and did I ever fail a run? They played games with us, and there were runs that we failed that they had to do again and everything like that. I can't think of anything that really kicked my butt to the point where I was like, oh my goodness, I might not pass this. Because I threw my whole heart and soul into doing it. Pool comp, that was an interesting phase, but I loved being under the water. So I had fun with that.
Were we already surfing stuff before that?
I didn't surf. That's something I'm still figuring out how to do, by the way. Like the one team guy that doesn't surf.
I'm not very good.
I got a longboard. I got a 9'4" right now that I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate.
I bought a surfboard after buds. I bought a bow and a surfboard. And that surfboard, actually I didn't buy the surfboard then. I bought the bow after buds, and then I wanted to buy a surfboard, but I didn't. So I just decided on the bow. I went up to performance archery, got a bow. That was my present to myself. Later, second platoon, I had like a couple world-class surfers in my platoon. Awesome guys.
That's cool.
So I got a board shaped in IB, and then I'm like, okay, this is gonna be my opportunity. Like I've tried my whole life. I'm like, I grew up on the water, at water mountains, and not good, right? I'm not good at surfing. But I'm like, this is my opportunity because we're going to Guam. Nothing's happening in the world. We'll do a couple trips here and there. And so I got this board shaped, and then we went to Guam, and then September 11th happened a week later. And to me, 2 weeks later, I think we had a trip right away, and then we came back and September 11th happened. So 2 weeks into it, that board sat in my room in Guam when we went to the Middle East, sat there the whole time, never touched salt water. That board never touched salt water until we took it to the beach with our daughter 10 years later after that in Coronado. That was the first time it had ever touched salt water. It traveled around with us to all the different places we'd been, never touched salt water. So yeah, surfing's still something.
I was just looking for my boy because he's the one that actually pushed me to get into surfing.
Nice.
He picked up on it and he just was digging being in the water. I'm like, okay, cool, something my boy and I can do. I should probably learn how to do this anyway. So I went and bought a longboard, and since then I've been playing around with it a little bit. But it's like any one of these hobbies, man. You know, we have so many things that we want to get into. You mentioned the bow. We got surfing, spearfishing, fishing, fighting, skiing. You know, there's all these different elements. And in today's day and age where it's so tempting to go down all of them, I feel like really picking a few that you can dial the precision in is a better, more exciting and fulfilling hunt of that craft than being scatterbrained.
Yeah.
You know, I really do. And that's tough to say. And I think that exploring them, this is personal, right? And maybe it connects with some people. I think exploring them is fine. Like, hey, you want to go skiing? Well, I don't ski much, but let's go. Cool. But really diving into like the three that you know, like these are mine.
Right.
That this is who I am.
Right.
This is who God called me to be. You know?
Oh, man.
I think that's key, because like I even get ADD with hearing you talk. I'm like, man, I really do need to get a bow. I see you guys shooting the bow. I see all the guys out there shooting the bow.
Yeah, a lot of
I
guys
love
are getting
shooting
into
the
it.
bow. I've shot a bow,
Yeah.
but it's just if I do it, I'm going to geek out with it. I'm going to go buy the best bow. I'm going to spend time on it, and that's going to take away from something else.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, you can only do so much, so you got to prioritize. And yeah, I still love shooting the bow. Still not very good at surfing. Obviously, I'm not surrounded by any place that I can surf here, so it's all mountain oriented now where we live.
Which I love, by the way.
What's that?
I said I love the mountains, but and
need
it's
that
beautiful.
ocean.
Like I love being out here, but there's no bodies of open water, and that I have a problem with.
Yeah, I know.
So it's a great place to visit.
Yeah. I do love mountains and ocean together, you know, so I love that Pacific Northwest. I love all the coast of British Columbia, Alaska. Like I love I love pretty much from the middle of California on up, where it turns into the more rougher cliffs, rocks, where it gets to that, and then all the way up. Like for whatever reason, that's my environment. But you know, there's some other things about California, Oregon, and Washington that make them less appealing, unfortunately. And here, feel a little more free up here in the mountains.
It does feel that way here.
Yeah, when we crossed the border from California, it just felt free when we moved out here after the military. It's just we're driving across. I distinctly remember it. We had one child was in the back, two others were at camp. We had the U-Haul behind us, and we're driving out here and we crossed that border, and it just felt. Maybe that's because all my magazines all of a sudden became legal. Wait a sec, we'll have to edit that. But we love it up here. We just felt more free as soon as we got here. But you were always comfortable in the water because you grew up near. What were you doing in the water growing up that made you comfortable when you got to pool comp?
Quite a few things. I mean, my dad always had a boat. You know,
Nice.
Being on a boat is part of who I am.
Yeah.
Like there's a certain sense of peace I have with it. So I grew up on the water, grew up jumping off the back of the boat. You know, when I was younger, I want to say about 13 or 14 years old, I worked with a guy named Wayne right down the road. And I used to hang out with his son. But the way he would make his living is he would go out into the ocean and he would dive for clams.
Nice.
And the interesting thing is up in New England, people always rake. It was like, I don't know if people know the rakers, right? They break their back. I mean, they'll work 12-hour days and only fill up a couple of bushels.
Wow.
So Wayne was a guy I actually went and did a lot of hunting with. That's actually how our relationship built. He's like, hey, I'm going to go hunting. I was like, oh, what are you going for? Deer. I was like, I'm in. So he'd come pick me up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And so one of my mentors, an influence in my life, really making a big impact on me, how to track, how to find the trails, you know, where to go, you know, what I'm doing with my firearm. And so that was a long journey for me that really led to a lot of fruit. But his job was to go out and dive for clams.
No way.
So he's like, hey, I could use some help if you want to come help me on the boat and do some sifting and get in there. And I'd go on the boat with him. He'd be down for an hour or 2 hours. He would go switch out his tanks. He'd go down to like 18, 20 feet. He'd be sitting there raking off the bottom. I mean, the technique that he has, mind-blowing. Where guys were raking all day for 12 hours that would get 2 bushels, he would do this for about an hour and a half to 2 hours and fill up 10 bags of little necks and clams. Dang. He would go cash in. He would make about $2,500, $3,000 in about 2 hours. So he'd work for 3 months of the year and hunt for the rest of the year.
Nice.
So that was this guy's lifestyle. Okay. It was like a gold mine.
Yeah.
It was always one of those things that we kind of just didn't talk about very much. But I'd help him on the boat. And then eventually it led me to the point where he's like, hey, you want to jump in the water with me? I was like, sure. Went and got my diving certification with John.
Nice.
We held each other accountable there. And then I would be down in the water, totally breaking some of the rules, I'm sure, with dive tables.
Yeah.
You know, down there with a fin on my hand.
Yeah.
You know, picking up clams, and we just made a ton of money when I was like 14 years old. And that was a big part of one of my experiences. And then John and I would go down to the end of the road. I would go surf torture myself sometimes at the end of the road, which is totally not recommended by anybody, by the way. Have a swim buddy. But that was something, just being in New England, that cold, frigid water.
Yeah.
It was just normal to me.
Right.
I didn't think about it.
Right.
The water was cold. You went in the water when the water was cold.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't even really have great wetsuits or anything like that.
Oh, I remember. Yeah. I got certified when I was 9. I don't think you were supposed to get certified that young, but my dad talked him into it. And I remember I have a picture of me somewhere where I have the wetsuit where it's just like past my arms and my feet, like past there, because they didn't make kid wetsuits back. That was 1982, 83. And so it was just this, I'm like this, you know, and it's Northern California, where it is cold and dark when you're starting. Like, it is dark up there, and when you go down. So I was comfortable in the water. I think that really helped, actually.
Yeah.
And I really liked it. Buds, I remember, was it drown-proof? Not drown-proofing, life-saving in first phase.
Yeah.
Because that's the only time, or that and pool comp are the only times where it's like me and you, instructor. Because usually you get yelled at. You know, you're getting pull-ups, they're telling you you're horrible, you're never going to make it, and you're more pull-ups, more push-ups, run, whatever. But this time, now it's hands-on. And I love that. And the jiu-jitsu helped with life-saving too, because when you have that, what was it, a victim or whatever, and they're just thrashing about and they're trying to take you down or whatever. Yeah. And you can just relax, and they're trying to drag you to the bottom, and they've done, 5 or 6, 7, 8 people in your line on the side of the pool, and they drag you to the bottom. Well, if they're working, guess what I'm doing? I'm just relaxing, just like in jiu-jitsu, just getting that, getting that place where you're getting relaxed for a second. The other person is doesn't know what they're doing or freaking out or whatever. So I was very comfortable, and I know they're gonna have to come up for air, and they did. And then that's when I do my thing and get a couple inches closer to the wall, a couple feet closer, and then they do it again and get down, just relax. So I love that. So I think the jiu-jitsu plus being comfortable in the water really helps with that and with pool comp, because once again, it's you against the instructor. Even though your hands are on the instructor, their hands are on you, and they're pushing you and slamming you to the bottom of the pool and doing that whole thing, tying your hoses in knots, but still you against them. It's more mind, but it's still you against them. And just relax while they're doing that, just like you would in jiu-jitsu or anything. And then you just go through those procedures in the right order to get everything back, turn your air back on, and keep going. So being comfortable is in the water. I think that was important for those 2 phases.
Yeah, that's why I always recommend free diving, and being at depth, learning how to control your heart rate, learning how to stay calm underwater. That applies to just about everything in your life. Being able to have that demeanor in a dynamic environment is critical. It's something that you need to practice. I mean, I think that's why surfers are really good at it too, because you get grabbed by that wave and you get pulled under. Like, fighting that is not going to help you. Keep yourself protected, but stay calm. You got to conserve your energy. You got to figure out how to be fluid and be like water in some cases. But there was a lot of circumstances. I mean, it was experience after experience. I mean, I've got all kinds of stories. One was, my dad was painting a house across this channel, and when the current gets going, it ramps up pretty strong. I mean, I don't know how many miles per hour it's going through there, 10, 20, 15 maybe. And so he's working on a house, and I actually was fishing on the shore. So he's like, hey, make sure you wear your life jacket on the, the shore over there, because I'm not going to be supervising you. So I'm over there casting the, the pole in. And I'm like, well, let me go a little bit deeper and trying to get like a good spot. And the current grabbed me and kicked my feet out underneath me. And I've got both poles in my hand that I didn't want to let go. And I think it was my tackle box and my pole I had in my hand. Here I am in the current, getting taken out all by myself. And I had to swim to the other side. And so that was just one of those circumstances from a young age. I'm like, I had to work through that. Right? I wasn't not going to make it, but it was an eye-opening, like, well, I could definitely get taken out and, have to fight to
Do you hold on? Do you keep them?
Oh, I kept them.
Like, a river runs through it. Remember Brad Pitt in the river? And they're going down, and he's holding on to the fish, and he's floating down, I think. I haven't seen that in a long time.
Never let go of your gun. Never let go of your fishing pole. Like, never let that thing go.
Yeah.
That's what it became. So little things like that just sprinkled throughout my upbringing. But being around the water is dynamic, and it's something that I think everybody grows from. That's why getting kids in the pool at an early age is really important too.
I think so.
Swim early.
So you make it through Buds, and first team is Team 2?
Team 2.
And this is where I cross paths with you. What year did you get to that Team 2?
Team 2 was 2001.
2001. Yeah. When, September 11th, where were you?
I was in the Buds classroom at September 11th. So
what phase?
It was first.
First phase.
Yeah, it was first phase. Yep, just sitting there. Buildings, went down, and literally in Buds. Because the pre 9/11, decision to be like, this is what I'm going to go do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have the commitment of like, you hear the stories, you ask questions like, where are we going? When are we getting in the fight? How can we go do what we're signing up for? And then having that realization of being like, oh, you know, we're actually at war now.
Yeah.
Like it solidified it for everybody that was in that era, I think, you know, especially in that class.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting spot to be in. But yeah, that's right about when it happened.
And did an instructor come in, or did was somebody teaching at the time and get pulled out?
I think they might have even turned the TV on.
Yeah.
You know, it was like that big of a deal where like we don't watch anything on the TV in there.
Right.
And they're like, hey, they flick the TV on, they're like, look what's going on.
No
Like, this
kidding.
just got really real. It was a sobering moment in the Buds
Yeah.
classroom. You know, you have all the instructors. You see it on the instructor's face. You're like, oh, okay, there's something real going on right now. You know, and then that's when we were like, okay, we're here. This is why we're here. You
No
know,
kidding.
that's the whole vibe that just kept
Right.
throughout my entire career. You know, I showed up to Team 2 and we hit the ground running. First deployment was right to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
It was like, boom, we're in it, right there. And we kind of knew working up to that our workup was that intense. So as a new guy, I didn't just come into a platoon being like, oh, we don't really know where we're going.
Yeah.
All the guys that had been there for a while be like, hey, you're a new guy, but you better act like you're going to war because we are.
Yeah.
So we always had that intensity of like, this is real.
Right.
Don't screw up. We're here for a reason.
Yeah.
And we were all fighting for that spot on Team 2 to get that deployment, right, to
Yeah.
go to Afghanistan. So we tried really hard, and I feel like our platoon specifically was just adamant about, you know, doing DAs, doing direct assaults, doing room clearance. I mean, we did that so much, even at Team 2, which previous to that was kind of rare, doing it that much of an emphasis. But knowing that that's what we're going to do, and that's exactly what we did when we went to Afghanistan. And first operation was clearing however many compounds, I want to say 50 different connecting compounds all in this giant village. It was just our platoon kicking down all those doors systematically.
Wow.
People were getting shot. We were finding drugs, finding weapons, finding caches. I mean, it was an all-day event. Right as the sun comes up, flying right into the poppy fields in the Chinook, loading the ramp down, running right to the target with a platoon, spent all day clearing, and then leaving right out of the same poppy field. That was my first operation.
No kidding.
Literally going into tunnels, you know, passing wheelbarrows of, you know, marijuana and all this stuff that was being built. It was a drug farm, clearly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just remember that being like, wow, okay, this is real. We're in it.
No
you know,
way.
I don't know how many weeks we were there for. I want to say like a week and a half or 2 weeks before that op kicked off.
No way.
So yeah, that was my first experience.
And you do more of those throughout that deployment?
That's all that was. That's all our deployment was. If we weren't doing that on a direct action, we were doing the presence patrols, which we all loved doing mobility.
Okay.
And so we were going from fob to fob. We were going from Bagram to Kandahar. We did that trip multiple times, and we would shoot off into different villages. And then Hindu Kush, right? It was in Hindu Kush, where it was Deshopan. You know, we were in that area, spent a lot of time in that area, which was just sketchy. You know, I've told that story before about, you know, that being the first time that really we got blown up, you know, in a convoy where the vehicle in front of me ended up getting shredded and the tailpipe hit me in the head. That was gnarly.
Were you in the turret?
I was in the turret. I was the number one truck for our convoy. So I was in the lead truck on everything that we did. So, you know, the tension that's behind that, because you're just waiting. I had a lot of that, okay, it could go off at any moment for like the first month of the deployment. And eventually I just let all that tension go, being like, okay, if this happens, like I just hopefully it takes me quick.
Yeah.
You know, and it just goes off. But rolling around in that presence patrol, that was an interesting operation where we had gone really deep in and we thought there was a pass. We ended up finding out like Apaches flew over, and then they were like, it's unpassable, but we wanted to see. So we were like all the way up into the crevice, as far as you could possibly get up in there, and it was blocked. And so we knew, I was like, we have to turn around now. It would go right back through. We knew there was guys trying to set up on us already. So I was like, this is imminent. This is gonna happen. And so when we turned everybody back around, we ended up making a little bit of a campsite. And when that campsite was set up, we knew we had to continue through, but there was the foreign nationals with us. And then there was the Army group that was supporting the foreign nationals. So they were connected.
Yeah.
We ended up doing the interop and connecting on the way up.
Okay.
So we had intersected. So when we're leaving, we knew that these guys set up on us at this point. They were like talking about it. The ambush is set. They're waiting for you to come out. There's only one road out, you know? So now we're like talking amongst each other, and they're like, all right, we're going to lead this crew out. You know, we're going to be the number one truck because we got the navigation. And as the new guy, and this being my first deployment, I'm feeding off of my guys. And I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to follow your guys' lead. But I knew they were upset about this because they had known that we were getting set up on.
Yeah.
And there was some very gray things that were going on between the foreign nationals and the chatter. So like where that was coming from and how they were getting their information, still to this day, I don't really know.
Yeah.
But ultimately what happened was the fact that we knew that we were going to get set up on, and our guys were pretty upset that we were going to be the first ones to go out. And be that as it may, the decision finally was made after about an hour of really arguments. Like guys were actually physically yelling at each other about this idea.
Yeah.
And the leadership worked it out where the foreign nationals were going to go, and then it was going to be the Army guys, and then it was going to be us.
Okay.
And so that was the decision that was made. And as we were going through, probably about a good 45 minutes to an hour on that route, you know, just the explosion went off. Boom! Just went off. I thought it was us at first. You know, it was that, like it felt like everything just shook, and then I had that piece of the tailpipe smack the top of my helmet.
Dang.
And so I had to do the whole like, you know,
Right.
the whole check.
Yeah.
And I did that for a second. Like, did I have any shrapnel in my neck? And we were just yelling contact. Of course, I had no idea where the contact was coming from, but that's what we had drilled. Like contact where, you know? And, you know, I'm checking my guys. We're all communicating with each other. You're right, you're right. Dust was just, you're breathing in dust at this point. You can't see anything in front of you.
Wow.
And when the dust settled, you know, as we started to go, because we knew it was an IED. So it was like, don't get out of your trucks, don't move. Everybody froze in place. And when the dust settled, the Army Humvee in front of me was just shred to pieces and flipped over.
Wow.
And the interpreter was instantly killed because he was on the wheel well. It ended up being a double stacked Italian mine that was in the road. And there was 7 Hiluxes of the foreign nationals ahead of that Army truck. Now, do the math, man. You know, I'll let you, you know, think about that yourself, right? It's just the coincidence of that being the next vehicle and then them going off. So there was a long process that ensued at that point. We had the EOD guys deploy. They went and searched the road. We were trying to figure out what was going on, what our next moves were. I mean, I'm thinking there's secondaries all over the place.
Right.
Why wouldn't there be? I'm waiting for bullets to start ripping into the dust. You know, that's what I was worried about because I was on the turret. So I'm just scanning. I've got I'm just looking. I mean, I didn't.
You on a 50?
I'm on a 50. Yeah, I had the Mod Deuce, which I love that thing. I had an intimate relationship with my Mod Deuce. And that eventually led to, you know, nothing else followed on, but we had the air support immediately came over. We had all the guys deployed looking for secondaries and scanning with metal detectors, and ultimately ended up having to wait to get that helo out of there, get medevac out. You know, they all got called in, and then we left that day. But that was probably the first like real interaction that I had. And we had with an explosive anyway, you know, in Team 2. So there was a lot of that already prepping me for where I was about to go, you know, going to the command and doing that because I feel like IEDs were just a part of the flow. You know, IEDs just became a like, you know, every week we were seeing something blew themselves up. You know, but anyway.
Dude, that's wild. And you did more of those patrols? Did you ever work with those the Host Nation Force or again?
I don't think that we linked back up with them at that point that I can remember off the top of my head. We may have. I just not recalling it right now.
Jeez. And so that's your first Team 2 deployment. And you come back and you do another workup and deployment at 2?
Do another workup, another deployment at 2.
And where'd you guys go for that one? Because this is where I meet up with you. This is where I hear about you for the first time. I think we passed each other in the hallway a few times. We're in different troops at Team 2. But I hear about you, and I might have, you know, a lot of time has passed since then. But I thought when I first heard about you was being in a gun truck on the 50, and I thought it was Iraq, on an alleyway holding security, and bad guy came out, and you like light him up. I think that's the first time I heard about you. And 'cause it was everyone was like, "Oh man, awesome!" And like, "Who was it?" You know? And they said you, and I was like, "Oh man, I think that's the first time that, other than in passing, you know, that distinctly remember hearing about you. Was that Iraq?
That was Afghanistan.
That was Afghanistan.
Yeah,
okay.
that was Afghanistan. Okay. Yeah, and that was an interesting circumstance as well. You know, I was so upset that I was not on the assault. So upset. But as a new guy, I'm kind of just like gritting my teeth, like, all right, I didn't get picked to go inside the building today. And again, you have all the veterans that are in there that have been there for a while that have been doing this, but they wanted me on the gun because I was the number one truck. And because the number one truck was we had to push past the main entry point. So when we pushed past the main entry point, they needed me up on the turret to cover down on everything that was past the entry point. So there was no way of getting out of it for me. Yeah. Everybody else in the middle trucks could kind of cheat it. They could come out of the turret because they didn't have where they're staring at a wall.
Okay.
So I just was in that position. It was my gun. I just got luck of the draw. But I ended up in the middle of the assault. I had a dude with a gun run around the flank of the building, and it literally like the clouds parted, and he just came around the corner. I'm like, I didn't go on the assault. This is my moment. Like, here, get on the gun. You know?
Yeah.
Or else if we hadn't been covered down on that guy would have came right up the middle. But that was that circumstance. I think it was the same.
That's exactly it. That's the exact story that I heard from people, and everybody's talking about it. You know, because if you weren't there, you know, you're like, oh man, if you weren't in a fight and a fight happened, especially if it was from your team, you know who's involved, what happened. And I distinctly remember people talking about you in that case, and how amazing that was. Man, that's
funny. Yeah, that was my first real time. Like that close.
Yeah.
You know, and I had other circumstances on that. And to think that was Team 2
right
at the time.
Yeah.
It was kind of a mind-blowing and kind of different way of thinking too, because really Team 2 was kind of in a little bit of a lull before we really start going back overseas with Afghanistan and Iraq. So for us to get that much experience at Team 2 for my first deployment, it made my whole career very real.
Interesting.
It wasn't like I was sitting around doing anything. All this training is absolutely real. I mean, I had hand-to-hand confrontations at Team 2.
Wow.
I had multiple engagements at Team 2.
Yeah.
And so that was before I even got to the command.
That's wild.
You know, it really was. It really was. I'm very thankful for the experience that I got there, and I'm thankful for the guys that I looked up to as well. So many of them, Goody, Ben, guys that was really close to me that guided me along the path of being like, you got to be in this position, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Were you already into combatives at that point, or did first confrontation? You were.
I was.
So it wasn't like that first confrontation, and what was that first confrontation like where you had to go? Were you dealing with a prisoner?
Yeah, it was a lot of prisoner handling. I had multiple times where I had to go in and grab the guy and be the one to cuff him. It wasn't anything as intense as it got when I was at the command. Definitely stepped up there, but we were putting our hands on people.
Yeah.
You know, every other day. That's why it was still real to me. When I checked into Team 2, I immediately was like, hey, what are you guys doing for fighting around here? Right? And I could get into this as a whole other subject.
Yeah.
But I was like, what are you guys doing for fighting? I'm like, oh, well, you know, not really anything. And I'm like, what? Like, I did check into Team 2, right?
Yeah.
I did check into a SEAL team. And that was a spark for me as well to continue that path, because like, there's this guy, Frank Cucci.
Yeah.
He's like 45 minutes away. You got to go to his gym.
Right.
And I remember I found his gym, got my butt kicked. I'm pretty sure, I'll keep his name out of this, but one of the guys that I really respected the command, he's out now. He ended up kicking the crap out of me the first couple of times on the mat, and I had no idea who he was.
Really?
So hindsight, kind of knowing who he was today, I was like, I'm glad that was the first guy that beat me up. But really eye-opening experience to know that we don't have any standards here. And I knew that right out of the gate. And that was something I was passionate about, which really, really clung on to. I told you about picking three things or a couple things you're really passionate about. And combatives for me was one of those things.
Yeah.
You know, no matter where we were, no matter what tent we were in, no matter what fob we were in, I was shadow boxing, I was training, I was working on it. I would try to find a bag. I would go through the visualization of the movements. And I did that my entire career, even at Team 2. So I was always very interested in it. Always knew it was something we needed a lot of work on.
Yeah.
And I think that's what led me to where I am today, and kind of understanding why I do what I do today, you know?
Right. I remember Frank Cucci was on the cover of a now defunct magazine called something, I want to say Combatives, but maybe that's because it's just in my head, because this is the 1994. And maybe someone could find it and it'll be like 95. But it was right in that time frame right there. But I distinctly remember finding out about Frank Kuchar. I think he had a couple videos maybe, but for sure on the cover, it wasn't Kung Fu magazine, but it was something like Empty Hand Combat magazine or something like that. You know, one of these like spin-offs of like a black belt meets Soldier of Fortune type of a magazine. And I've got to still have it in a box somewhere because I've thrown none of these things
That'd be
away.
A classic.
Yeah.
You'd have to post about that if
If I find that, I will post about that for sure. But I remember seeing that and being, you know, on the other coast, and the East Coast might have been outer space, you know, for me at that point. But I wanted to, because I was training with different people, trying to find people that had worked with the military or whatever, trying to find things that were practical. Even back then, you know, Jeet Kune Do kind of was that, because it would take what's useful, discard what's useless. You know,
correct.
Bruce Lee's
same methodology
mantra.
applies today.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're bringing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's how I got involved with it. So it's like elbows, knees, headbutts, straight blast, and then, this Jiu-Jitsu thing, let's work that in. But I remember Frank Kuchar being on there, SEAL, you know, from that command. I was like, this is my path.
Yeah.
This is my guy right here. So it was interesting when I got to the East Coast. They were bringing in, when I got to Team 2 around that time, they were bringing somebody in that was strictly jiu-jitsu though, that would come in Tuesday and Thursday mornings, I want to say, in one of the gyms up above in one of the training areas. So I'd go over there and roll, and I forget his name right now. He had a studio somewhere in, maybe not Virginia Beach, but in Norfolk. But so we did that. But I was shocked when I got to the SEAL teams early on, even way before September 11th, how little empty hand, unarmed combat, martial arts was incorporated into the training. You really had to go and do it on the outside on your own.
You did.
You know, back then you had to make it one of your things, as you said, as you said. So I was that was one of the things that surprised me. Also surprised me that we weren't immediately off flying around the world doing the Save the Princess operation and flying back for beers the next night. Like that was not how it was before September 11th. And it took September 11th to do the things that we thought we were going to do when we came in.
That's correct.
But Team 2 was a great experience for me. We had a lot of guys from your next command that had maybe gotten in trouble or whatever else that were now at Team 2 and from pre-September 11th stuff, but they were bringing some of that knowledge over there, that mindset over there. We had a really good...
Chiefs. I had the opportunity to have one of those guys there with me too.
Yeah, we had a whole slew. I think all of them were like that, I think, at that time frame.
Which was just like a gem. Like what a blessing to have those guys back. You know, because when guys go there, especially now, you don't really plan on leaving to go anywhere. Like this is home. You know how in it you are, how much of a sacrifice it has to be. So like you said, whether they were in trouble or not, or whatever the case was, so be it.
They weren't there by choice, but to our benefit.
To our benefit.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Yep. And they were great. They were fantastic. I think all the troop chiefs.
That's part of the reason that I got there. I mean, the guy that pushed me, and I basically said, as soon as I even knew that the command was an option, and they're like, hey, you know, who's interested in this? You know, I believe they asked the whole platoon, and we're all sitting there, and I was just like,
yeah,
you know? And then like only a couple guys rose their hand, and I'm kind of like, shouldn't we be all striving to get to this next level? Yeah. And they told us, they're like, hey, this is great. You know, whatever status you have here, say bye to all of it. You're taking the frickin' trash out again, and you got to basically go to the lowest level. Then you got to be okay with that. And I'm like, well, that's how you forge. I knew that. But my troop chief at the time helped put the pieces together to be able to get there. And this is just a kind of sidebar here, but we're talking about that troop chief. So Jimmy, he put me in the position to go screen, and I screened, and I actually had passed all my screening, but they're like, hey, you're too young. They're like, so you did well.
I remember
Come back
this.
next year. And I was like,
I remember
so
this.
bummed. So bummed. So I went back to the platoon, told Jimmy as I came in, you know, didn't make it. I was too young. They're going to roll me to next year. So I was just like, okay, continue mission. Don't get discouraged. I think about 3 weeks later, he had said, hey, a couple of the guys bumped out of their spot and didn't make it through the screening. You're the next guy on the list. And I don't know how much fudging he did in there, but I'm very grateful for whatever happened and transpired. Wow. And then I got the last spot of my class.
Wow.
And so I went in there, and I was the youngest dude in my class to go screen.
Nice.
And I remember being the youngest guy to check in to my squadron.
Wow.
I remember I looked through all the dates, and I'm like, whoa, I was 23 years old to check into the squadron.
That's awesome.
I think it might have been broke since then.
Yeah, not by much. I mean, you're not
going
to break that by much.
You really can't. But however I pulled that off, that's where I was, man. I was the newest, new guy when I checked in.
Dude, that's amazing. Did you do another one at Team 2? How many deployments did you do it to?
I did. That's the question you had asked me. So the second deployment, I had done my screening, and then we deployed. And man, like the chips that fell into place, I did a surveillance class with Team 2. And some of the guys that we know came from overseas to teach us. And I ended up getting honor man in that class. So because I got honor man in the surveillance course, they pushed me to a part of the world that we were doing reduced signature stuff.
Dang.
So I was operating in a part of the world that we still can't to this day talk about. And we were operating in that environment where I had everything that I needed. I had a safe house. I had all my vehicles. I had done all the TSE stuff. I knew it like the back of my hand. I loved getting into building and doing all that. So I had multiple things at my disposal. I had interpreters at my disposal. And I was there for a few months. And man, what an experience. Contrasted from I'm kicking down a door and I'm in a turret.
That's a lot of
to presence
really
control,
cool experience to have at a
totally
very young
shift
age.
To now I got to dress like everybody else, look the part, find this parts of the city, take high value photo targets, and all those different elements, creating routes to and from. I mean, it was super cool.
That's super cool awesome. So that's why you didn't do the PSD. So when we took the PSD mission, that's what you were doing.
Yep.
Because I was trying to remember if you were at doing the PSD, because we grabbed different troops and platoons, and we all kind of got mushed together to build this thing that became the protective service details for the Iraqi government. But I was trying to remember, because it was very possible you could have been there on a detail and I was on a different one or whatever. Yeah, but you were doing that. Oh, that's so cool.
Luck of the draw. I got that package.
Nice.
And it was only me and like me and like 2 or 3 other guys.
Yeah.
That went, and we were just bouncing around. I mean, it was pretty cool, man. We had a whole 10,000 square foot safe house with like multiple, options to choose from, and it was awesome.
That's really cool. Yeah, one of the guys that was, so we took the nomenclature from your next command at Team 2, because we had so many of those chiefs and senior chiefs and even a couple officers over there as the CO and ops boss at the time. So the guy that was a team leader as an E6 in that next fourth one maybe, but we were both team leaders. Even though I was an 01, he was an E6, they changed the nomenclature to team. They're trying to structure everything like the command that you were going to go to next, but he had come from doing what you did. Yeah. So he had just come off of that.
That's cool.
Really long deployment. They bounced him to a couple different spots around the world doing those kind of missions. He was gone for a long. He's like off the radar, like doing that. Like we're focused on Iraq right now. We're doing this PSD mission, and some guys are off doing some other stuff. They got kind of forgotten about. Like they didn't they didn't come home. Like they were just gone for I think he was gone for over a year, bouncing around because he volunteered also to stay or to take another something or other there. But when he's out now, and awesome guy, still stay in touch.
That's cool.
But that's really amazing experience to have as a new guy, very young, doing that Afghan deployment, and then doing these reduced signature operations places, and then going to the command that you ended up going to.
It set me up for success.
That is incredible.
I saw the best of both worlds, and with the love of combatives and knowing that was kind of a gap and a missing link, is like I had the assaulter, which I loved. I had the know that the combatives were missing, and then I got to do the reduced signature. So it all just groomed me in preparation for exactly what I love to do today. Like that low vis, kind of be prepared to get ready to do an assault, but do it where nobody can tell that you're going to do it.
That's pretty cool.
And just put all the pieces together.
Yeah.
And so throughout that journey, I was like, oh, there's a gap. And I'm always like, I'm trying to tweak everything. I'm like, if there's a tactic that needs to be fixed or a piece of gear that needs to be fixed, it's like, that's what I love to do. And then the next phase of my life was just surreal, right?
Yeah.
Just thinking about all that.
Yeah, you had a solid run.
Yeah.
And you were at Team 2 even, you're tweaking gear there, you're morphing things.
I was the gear guy. I went to parachute rigger school.
Oh, so you got to sew.
I was the guy that everybody was bringing their gear to, so I know how to sew.
Yeah.
So I was tweaking my carrier, I'd rip things off, put it back on, everybody would leave, I'd go to the apparel loft, link up with those guys.
Yeah.
So gear was always in my cage, messing with stuff.
Yeah.
And that's just, I loved doing it. And then I went to sniper school. That was after my first deployment. I did sniper school. Yeah. I had gone to scout before my first deployment. I actually had to finish up. I went pick, scout, then I did
remember
sniper.
They started doing that. So pick, you're doing the photography stuff, kind of the technical stuff, putting it to the computer, shooting it up, SATCOM, whatever they're doing. And then stalking.
And then stalking, which I freaking loved.
Oh, nice.
I loved that portion of it. And then all the shooting stuff after the fact, and then putting everything together at the end there was when I came home, and then I was able to get that qual. So I ended up picking up sniper, and then breacher right after.
That's pretty
so
cool.
I grabbed both of those too.
And you did a real breacher school. Like I did it
breacher.
before September 11th, where it was not quite, not nearly anything what it became after September 11th, when it really became, okay, making entry rather than all the other, what do we call it? Something E, anyway, something advanced, something explosives. Anyway, I forget what it was, but you were doing still a lot of obstacle clearance type stuff along, you're doing breaching the doors and stuff like that, but not anything to what you guys have learned, even in school, before you went to the command. I'm sure it took it to a whole nother level. So you get to do breacher, sniper, you have all these different experiences, and you're, as part of that, you're doing surreptitious entry type stuff, which is awesome. I mean, the first book I put Sewing Machine in there, and it's in it made it into to the series with Chris Pratt, so you get to see Chris Pratt building something in the series. Yeah, that's awesome. Because it's a skill I didn't have, because I always had to go to the rigger and bring a case of beer, especially before we started getting.
If you give me something right now, yeah.
Nice.
And in fact, if I had that, like, instead of telling somebody to do it, I can just grab it and show them. This is what I'm talking about, you know, because I like to be able to get to that root of it. That's cool. That's cool that you put that in the series.
Oh yeah, it looks pretty good in there. But when you get to your first, so you get to this new command and you're a new guy again. How long is it before you kick out the door and go overseas once you show up at your squadron?
I mean, obviously went through our screening, and
how was that for you?
I mean, it was awesome. I mean, I made some really good friends. I got to know Adam Brown more. You know, I screened with Adam. I screened with Louis Safrant. You know, a lot of guys aren't here anymore. You know, so Colin. Well, actually, Colin came in after, but multiple guys, and it was awesome. It was a great experience. I mean, it was just to that next level that you wanted. You know, as much as we were pushing through CQB and really going to that next level of precision. You know, you felt it. You felt that kind of coming together. So screening was great, and it wasn't too far after that. I don't know the exact months, but I mean, it was pretty short before we were just deployed again.
Timelines are a little shorter over there.
Yeah.
So you Iraq or Afghanistan?
Iraq. Right to Iraq. Nice. And I was just like
at the height
every night.
Yeah.
Every other night. You know, operating. A lot of it's kind of crazy to think back on. You know, even talking about Team 2 is like so much up into that point, but because we were operating at such a high tempo, I literally will be sitting here and I'll just be like, oh yeah, I forgot I did that. Oh yeah, about that op. Like it was that intense. It was almost like you forget about ops that you did that were intense. Yeah. Like we got blown up, or like I said, felt like every week we were hitting something, going after an IED cell, chasing guys, you know, So.
Are you working out of a Baghdad area, or where are you in Iraq? For this first one.
Where were we?
Isn't it crazy how they blend together?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, it's. I don't recall this stuff very often.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm sitting there telling my kids all these stories every
And that's
day.
probably a good thing.
So
because you're building on a foundation rather than being stuck in that foundation and you with your feet stuck in it and unable to move forward.
I'm very much like, hey, this is what I did. This is who I was.
Right.
That's not who I am today.
Right.
You know, I'm a much different man today than I was even at the end of my career.
Yeah.
So there's a part of me that's kind of like, okay, this is what I did. How do I use it for right now? How do I reframe myself to be the best version of myself right in this very moment?
Right.
That is important, I think, no matter who you are.
Yeah.
But when I look back at my career, there's just so many gray areas because it was that intense that it's almost hard to recall sometimes. I mean, it's the truth, whether it's not because I don't have a lot of repetition doing it. But that first deployment was in Iraq. It was super intense. You know, I had realized very quickly, like, this is where I thought the teams were. Even as much as I appreciated Team 2, I knew that this is what it was supposed to be like at that level of intensity, you know, where we're literally refining our tactics every night.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, that didn't quite work well. Let's apply it to next night. Oh, that didn't work. And that's where the fruits come at the end of the deployment, you know. Then you pass that down to the next guys and you just watch that process unfold, you know.
So awesome. And you're and what is your position when are you a breacher here on these first, let's say, few deployments? Or are you doing sniper stuff? You're point man.
Point man.
You're going in.
Sniper.
Assaulter going in.
Lean into that hard.
Nice.
I want to be the first guy to touch a dude. The first couple of times, I wasn't in recce yet, so I wasn't but I was still the point man for my team.
Okay.
So anytime my team went off, it was like, hey, that's our building, I was leading them.
Okay.
So I was close comms with the recce team.
Yeah.
Because that's where I wanted to go. I wanted to be a part of the recce. So I was talking to those guys, learning from guys like Thomas Ratzlaff.
Yeah.
I was really leaning into show me the knowledge, let me plan the routes with you. And then it wasn't too far. I believe the next deployment I was starting to do more recce stuff, and then I ultimately became part of the recce team.
Wow.
And so that's where I wanted to be. That was the pinnacle for me, because I had noticed like those guys were getting their hands on way more people because they're always first to the target, and you can always pick and choose. And so for me, I was like, I want control of that. I want to know like where each ladder rung is, where each step is, where I'm going to go, how I'm going to maneuver the team, and be the first guy to come up there and take my safety off. Like I want that. That was motivation for me. That was my passion. And so I just really leaned into learning from everybody around me and then making that a part of my journey. Man. And then again, that goes back to the combatives piece. Like I'm either pulling the trigger or I'm not.
Yeah.
So if I'm not pulling the trigger, well then I'm doing something else. I'm either wrapping you up, arresting you, or I have to pull a blade out if that's the circumstance, depending on what the case is,
Man. And so you come home from these, you train up, you go, you're on this rotation cycle that's super intense. And are you going back to Iraq mostly, or do you do Afghanistan in there as well?
Both. We did both. Yeah, we bounced back and forth. I would say it was evenly dispersed through both. Man. Yeah, we did a few Iraq deployments. Like I said, dude, I literally have to like sit here and like write this stuff out.
Yeah.
And like recheck, like, okay, this is where I went, I don't know if it's because my brain tries to, move on past it but
it's probably a good thing because you're not living back there. You're taking maybe the lessons from it and applying. I see you applying them
principles
all the time. Yeah.
Very principle based. Like this is the major thing that I learned that can apply to everything else that I do.
Yeah.
And I don't get wrapped up in the stuff that would hold me back.
Right. You're learning on an hourly basis, daily basis, weekly basis. You're tweaking things. You're tweaking gear. You're tweaking tactics. Enemy's doing the same thing, by the way.
That's correct.
For anybody listening. And so it's not just you're like constantly, right here, the enemy gets this vote. There's, of course, Murphy's Law, and they're observing, they're learning, and they're adapting.
Yeah.
And they continue to do that.
I expect to go up against us when I go to fight. And that's true for combatives. That's true for any type of overt assault, is I expect them to be way better than we are.
Yeah.
And like we have to go up against ourselves. If we had to go assault a house right now into here with you and I prepared to take an assault, how would we respond? Like I'm ready for that.
Yeah.
And that level of intensity, which is not anything to shake a stick at. We would fight to the death, right? And I have to be prepared for that fight to the death. And I think that's where the realism comes into play of sharpening that sword on a constant basis, of knowing that as soon as we get complacent, forget it. Might as well stop doing what you're doing. Yeah. Because the enemy's out there doing exactly that. They get the vote and they want it more than you do.
Yeah. They have a little home field advantage, which is not just a physical thing, but psychological thing as well. So what are you taking from these assaults and putting hands on people and prisoner control and all the rest of it to your training and your combatives when you're back at the beach? And what are you bringing to your team, and who are you bringing in to train? And how's that looking? How are combatives morphing over this time where you're not just doing it in a sterile environment in some sort of a dojo or whatever? You are doing it real life and in a way that hasn't been done so consistently really ever with these kind of tools that we have today and the technology we have today. And now you're bringing that back and you have a few months at home and you're thinking about how you could be better prepared the next time you go downrange. What are you bringing to combatives and incorporating into that combative training when you're home?
Definitely the reality of, still to this day, I think this statement is true, is that we're putting hands on people way more than we're shooting them. And that statement should really hit home for anybody that works behind a gun. And if you're not putting an emphasis on hand-to-hand combat, you're wrong. You're just flat out wrong. You need to be leaning into that. If this is your job and this is your duty, you have a responsibility to make sure that you can manipulate somebody, another human being, and do it with confidence so that you can transition to your appropriate weapon systems. And so the repetition of being overseas again and again and again only validated that for me. It only solidified it, like, this is true, you have to keep leaning into this and get good at it. And again, like you said before, sometimes it's only a handful of guys that ever took it seriously. And why, I don't know. It's a phenomenon almost that you'd get this select group of guys. It's almost like you've got to want a little bit more pain. You have to put your pride aside. There's a lot of things mentally that you have to really be able to give up to be able to step into the ring. So that element kind of led me down the road. Now, as a new guy, I took the passion, which was guys like Hendo, which I learned so much from, and really listening and watching what he was doing with combatives and how serious he took it, and just learning. And I would show up. If Hendo put a course on, I'd show up. There was never a time where he was like, hey, I'm going to do a boxing lesson, or I'm going to do this lesson, and I didn't show. I think you're failing yourself if you're not. So I set that base foundation of really just trying to learn from the guys around me earlier in the beginning. But then as I became more of a veteran in the squadron, at that point I had a little bit more say. And then as I got more experience, I would start to put pieces together like you're saying, totally Jeet Kune Do, right? Take what's useful, disregard what's useless, and add what's uniquely yours. Put the formula together, and then that's what you have. You have a combatives system. You have the latest combatives. Whatever it is today, right now, at this very second, is different than it was 10 years ago. And so to do that and apply that principle all the way throughout my career, I started to like, oh, I can pull in Bas Rutten, who does bar fighting and knows with Thai boxing really well.
He's great.
I can go to Holland. I can work with Kelly McCann. I can work with Tony Blauer. I can work with guys like Lee Morrison. And so that was one of the benefits of really being at a level where you are living this lifestyle from a tier 1 perspective, and you get to choose who you want to work with for the right reason. Right? So while guys were going to jump, climb, name driving course, I would choose fighting.
Nice.
Every single time. So like, hey guys, this is your 2 weeks. I was like, okay, where are the best fighters in the world? Where are we going to go train? And so that was just what I did my entire time. Is there anytime there was an opportunity, I was the guy that was trying to get to the combatives room in the morning before anybody else. I took that seriously, and I just wanted to continue to lean into sharpening that sword. And I saw the gap, and continuing in the squadron, I knew reduced signature tactics and combatives was lacking, and then also the research and development side of things was lacking as well. So I was the squadron representative for all the gear. So that was a whole other world that opened up to me. I was like, oh, we actually have funding that we can go do. And there were some bad habits I took to that, my own business too. It was like, my wife was like, hey, you can't just go spend whatever you want on whatever you do just because you want a cool piece of gear. But those two elements really became a part of what I really love to do. And that was my top 3, being a sniper and a point man to the target, research and development with the latest and greatest gear and weapon systems, and then the low-vis combatives. Those are the 3 things that I loved to do, and to this day, I still appreciate all 3 of those.
Oh man, so awesome. And tweaking the gear. So at some point on there, you start to actually engage with the companies and actually have what you're doing be able to get turned around and into gear that you were taking downrange 4 months later, 6 months later, a year later, but much more of a quick turnaround than we're going to do this big R&D process with big Navy or big Army or even special operations in general, even SOCOM in general. It's still going to, things take a while. And guess what? While that's happening, guess what the enemy's doing? They're adapting quickly, because what don't they have? This gigantic bureaucracy and approval process. But you're at a place where you can make these tweaks very quickly, and at some point in there, you realize, oh, I can just go to the company and say, hey, turn this battery this way, or hey, what would be good is this, or here's what I made.
That's correct.
And here's my helmet from back in the day, like as an example, like this thing.
Which I love that you brought that. I love, like icons like that, they have a place in time where it just brings back so many memories just staring at that thing. But I love it.
That'd be crazy. This is a Mitch, what is it called? Maritime Mitch, I think.
Maritime Mitch.
Was what this thing was called. So it had the cutouts, which was a radical thing back then.
It was a radical thing. And right before you did that, right before that model, we were cutting out ourselves. In breacher school, I remember we were like, oh, that's a good idea. Probably totally against any type of testing regulations that would have failed everything that we were doing.
Yep, I totally remember guys cutting their helmets, and the commands were like, "Don't cut your heads. It's doing something to the structural integrity of the thing." And but people saw this and were like, "Oh, that's a good idea. Guess what fits under here? Oh, my pelters fit a little better under here." Red lens light that I taped up, and that's the original tape from Afghanistan. I wore this in Iraq, wore this in Afghanistan, but it's taped up here. And then these little guys, these were called bite lights. I think, and I couldn't remember why, but one was red and one was green, and I think one was better under nods or something like that when you're in the helo and you're going in and something's changing from a VI to a vehicle interdiction to a compound assault or whatever, and you're looking at something. And then there was this original mount you told me, and you noticed right away.
Yeah, that was one of the original ones that they built for that model too.
That's wild. We had and then put the strobe back there in the back, and then these things.
Got your bungee.
My bungee that is totally done. I don't want to pull on it; it'll just
out.
Destroy right now. Some Uzim piece now, but that was so your nods wouldn't bounce around. Kept them kind of in there. But then not long after this, a Surefire guy passed through Iraq. And remember him he's like, can I take pictures of that? And he took pictures of all this, and then I think Surefire did something with those later.
I mean, just based off of that helmet, the evolution of just staring at that thing, how many things came out after that where somebody invented, or I say invented, but reimagined the ability to connect your nods, to reimagine the strobe, to reimagine the way the light mounts, to reimagine the mount on the thing, the strap system. It's like, that's where it started though.
Crazy.
And guys like you were getting reps in saying, hey, this is kind of like, I need this tweaked. And that's really the evolution of creative thinking, of being able to go directly to these vendors that were interested in helping us. Hey, whatever their motivation was, didn't really matter. No. Our motivation was uniquely, how do I save more lives? How do I get my brothers the best equipment possible to be able to put us in the best position and to have the right gear? And so going direct to a vendor saying, this is the tweak, fix it. I actually get to talk to the design guy. I think over the last several years, whatever, the book came out, or however the command changed things, politics were able to reach their hand way down into where we were, where they don't belong, and ultimately changed the way that we were able to do that. Where I was able to talk to a vendor, now they put all types of red tape around it. I think they're coming back around, but it hamstringed a lot of creative thinking and fast-tracked ability to bring the best gear to guys. And it went back to that big Navy type of thinking, slowed a lot of the stuff down,
Yeah, no, absolutely. You could see it. You could see it happening. And then one of the helmets is another one's around here somewhere, right there, I think. But then to see what it evolved into with Ops Core and rail systems and all the rest of it, and see the evolution of the helmets over the years from really right after September 11th and then up to when I left. It was cool to see that progression, and then be able to. It was so cool to know you guys at that command and see what you were doing and have these relationships where you could pass that along to regular teams and all that stuff. So that was a really cool time, I think, to be in. And you guys had an approval from your command to actually start a company to do that.
Right.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not crazy. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Because you had
that story, that whole thing is interesting as well.
A special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Navy Federal Credit Union. I have been a member since 1996. There is my cue card right there. Man, Navy Federal has been with me every step of the way while I was in the military for those 20 years, and now that I am out. And they've taken care of me, taken care of my family, and have had nothing but the best experience with them. So to have them sponsor this podcast is it's humbling, and I'm honored. Becoming a member at Navy Federal Credit Union lets you experience more, from everyday commutes to your next big vacation. The flagship credit card earns you 3 times the points on travel, so you can get rewarded for wherever you're headed next. Plus, this premium travel card has a low annual fee of $49 and 2 times the points on all purchases outside of travel, meaning the rewards don't have to end even when the vacation does. Speaking of rewards, you can get a Navy Federal auto loan and reward yourself with a new car. Applying is easy. You can do it on their mobile app, online, or by phone, and it's so fast, you can get a decision in seconds. Navy Federal has great rates on auto loans. Plus, with their car buying service powered by TrueCar, you can shop, compare, and get upfront pricing on your next new or used car. At Navy Federal, members are the mission. Navy Federal is insured by NCUA. It is open to the Armed Forces, the DoD, veterans, and their families. Flagship rates are variable and range between 10.74% and 18% APR based on credit worthiness. ATM fees for cash advances are up to $1 at non-Navy Federal ATMs. Credit and collateral subject to approval. Message and data rates may apply. Visit NavyFederal.org for more information and to apply. I want to thank my friends at Black Rifle Coffee for sponsoring the Danger Close podcast. I've been a huge fan for the longest time. Drink Black Rifle Coffee every day. And if you keep your eyes peeled, you will notice that perhaps Chris Pratt is wearing a Black Rifle Coffee t-shirt, not unsimilar to this one, in the Amazon series adaptation of the Terminal List. Now you can go to blackriflecoffee.com/dangerclose and use code DangerClose20 at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Black Rifle Coffee, America's coffee. Keep crushing. It's time to get mountain tough. Make America tough again, right there on the shirt. You know when you go to the gym and you don't know what workout to do? I hate that. With Mountain Tough, they have created the most functional fitness programs ever designed, all delivered to your phone. Created by veteran Navy SEALs and Army Rangers, they make it convenient to go to the gym, do the prescribed workout, and get in the best shape of your life physically and mentally. As you know, if you've been following me for a while, I've been doing a lot more typing than I've been doing running or lifting or doing any functional type fitness. So this is how I'm going to get back after it. Mountain Tough. Plus, they're awesome guys. I've met them down here. We did a little podcast type interview together, and they are awesome. Solid crew. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And increase mental toughness, build muscle, improve endurance anytime, anywhere from any mobile device. Thousands of hours of testing on dedicated mountain hunters, first responder, and military personnel. Programs for everyone, those who hit the gym and heavy weights, those who like to work out at home with no gear at all. Guidance for beginner, intermediate, and elite athletes. The right nudge from the right person at the right time can change your destiny. And regardless of your age or circumstances, I am nudging you to start today, as I know the Mountain Tough programs and Mountain Tough community will enable you to become the best version of yourself. Mountain Tough, that is MTNTOUGH, is offering Danger Close listeners 20% off all their online training programs and apparel with the code DangerClose at MTNTough.com. Welcome to the gear highlight portion of the Danger Close podcast. All right, so if you go to crusheverything.com, you can check out all the blades that Dom Raso, Dynamis Alliance have out there. And there are quite a few. I have multiples of each. And right here, this was the original right there. So you can see that. Yeah, that's the Dynamis Blade right there, made by Winkler Knives, Daniel Winkler down in North Carolina. And this thing is just solid. Love this blade right here. And the sheaths, also about the sheaths fit all the knives. So that is really cool about this. Goes inside the waistband. Awesome sheath. It just finds in the appendix. It just finds at good spot to ride. And yeah, love the sheaths. Love that blade. The second one he came out with right here. So that is the Razorback. Yep. Named for our friend Adam Brown. And if you have not read Fearless by Eric Blem about Adam Brown's life, I highly recommend it. So this one's a little smaller right here. Has that red color in there. Oh, love this blade too. This one means a lot. So that is the Razorback. This is the newest right here. This is the Revere. So it's a little bigger than the Dynamis Blade. And this thing, I just started carrying it about 2 weeks ago, and I love it. This thing, it's not too big to carry in the appendix, and it is solid. So this thing, awesome. The Revere, you definitely need one or two, because why? One is none. Yep. This is the SMR Blade right here. So this one's really made to go with board shorts, be in a place, carry in a place where you maybe don't want anyone to know that you are carrying, but you're wearing shorts and that sort of a thing. Same sheath, but different color right here. So it's a little less threatening, but and it also acts as a bottle opener, which is probably how you'll use it the most. But this thing is pretty sweet as well. And this particular one right here is infused with this coating, so it does not rust. So you can find out more about that. Crusheverything.com, hit the blade section, find out about that coating. And that coating is also on this second generation combat Flathead. And if you've read my novels, you know how much I love this thing. If you've read my latest, In the Blood, you will know that this has a starring role, but it's infused with that coating as well. So you don't have to worry about rust. And this thing is just solid. I love this combat Flathead. The earlier ones right here were wrapped in leather. So these are awesome. Love these. Those ones are not infused with that coating, but super solid. Love these things. What else? Trainers come with these as well. So you can practice. And on that website, crusheverything.com, you can find out about Dom's training courses and your options there for some blade work and some blade training. Right there, that is the sheath for the combat flathead. So that works as well. And usually I carry that one like on the in my pocket right there. And my other blade is right there in appendix. And then there are some non-metallic options. So those are in there as well. And I can only think that James Reece will be taking advantage of the non-metallic option in a future novel. Thank you for tuning in to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. Find out more about Dom Raso at crusheverything.com. Follow along on Instagram at Dynamis Alliance. Type in Dom Raso. You can follow him as well. And if you like this conversation, be sure to leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me at Jack Carr USA on the social channels. You can go to officialjackcarr.com. That's the website. And go to jackcarrusa.com for the merch. Thank you so much for tuning in. Sincerely appreciate it. Take care out there. Be safe. Stay strong. Keep fighting.